when England set this up. They didn't give them that right. So even though you will notice, sometimes this confuses people, that there's a provincial portion of your income tax, the right to make laws about that is exclusively federal. They have to make the decision as to what you have to pay. Because the provinces have the right to make those laws. All right, so let me finish off with a few more that were given to the province. So provinces were given the right to property. So property in the province, if you look just even at land, right? The land in the province is covered by the Real Property Act, which is a provincial statute, and you register your property in the provincial land titles office, and the system that they use for registering that is according to laws that were made by the province. For any of you going to be taking Law 2? Okay, anyone who's in accounting will be. I talk about real property at a much greater extent there. I explain a lot more about this. But for this course, you just got to know property was given to the provinces in 1867. We talked about education, healthcare. Who makes the laws about healthcare? So all the rules are basically made by the provincial government because that's who England gave them to. That's the only reason. For those of you who have a question about that, I'd like you just to hold it. There's an issue here, okay? Just so you know. But the rule is laws about healthcare must be made by the province. But there is something that can be confusing about that. Roads and highways.
Provincial.
So who makes the laws about driving? How many of you have ever got a traffic violation? Well, no? Yeah? Anyone who's been here longer than about 3 days. Okay. So, how many of you have never gotten a traffic violation? Never got a speeding ticket? Never got any? Holy, never? Yeah, but still. All right. If you did, you'd be under the Highway Traffic Act. It would say that. And that's a Manitoba statute. Drinking. Who has the right to make laws about alcohol in the province? And what do we have in Manitoba? Where do you buy it? Primarily. The Liquor Commission. That's the Manitoba Liquor Commission, right? Where do you buy liquor in Quebec? Everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. I'm sure they got vending machines on the corner with wine in them that you can go and buy, right? Oh, it's everywhere, right? Grocery stores.
Hard liquor is actually in a liquor store.
Okay.
Wine and beer can be bought at grocery stores and
all over the place. Anyways, and why are their rules different? We could never buy wine or beer. Well, we could always buy beer, but we could never buy wine anywhere but the liquor store, right? You had to go there for everything but beer in Manitoba. Now they're expanding that out because Sobeys wants to sell booze. But it's changing a bit. But any of those changes are made by the province because they have the right to make those laws. They have the right to loosen them up. They have the right to tighten them. So I just want to do a little quick little review. Who has the right? Oh, wait a minute. So, who has the right to make a law with respect to drinking? Who has the right to make the laws with respect to driving?
Province.
And who makes the laws about drinking and driving? If you put them together, whose law are we in? Wait a minute, let's go back. Drinking is?
Province.
And driving is?
Province.
And you put them together and we get?
Federal.
Impaired driving is a federal offense. How does that work? How can two provincial things, when you put them together, become a federal thing? Does anybody know why? What'd she say?
Criminal code.
It is, but why? That's the name of the statute. It's a federal statute. It's a good clue, though.
So it's a crime.
What? So
So the federal government will pass laws in regards to criminal offenses.
So why is a provincial thing and a provincial thing become a federal crime? Why is it different? It has to do with the seriousness of the behavior, right? So when a behavior becomes serious enough that it's considered to be a crime, crimes are under the federal government. So that's why you put the two together, it becomes more serious to the point where it raises it up to a crime, and therefore the federal government gets the right to control it. So what's the age of majority in Saskatchewan?
18.
19.
It's not 19. It's 18. You just can't drink. You're still an adult. When you're 18 in Saskatchewan, you're just not a responsible adult. You're not allowed to drink. So you're 19, right? And you guys know that every like you do this up and down thing, right? Where BC, it's what? How old do you have to be to drink in BC?
19.
And then Alberta, it's
18.
and then
19.
Saskatchewan 19, Manitoba,
18.
Ontario,
19. Yeah.
Quebec 12. No, I'm just kidding. But they always have historically had the most relaxed liquor laws is in Quebec. Historically, that's always been the case because they got to make the rules. Do you understand that? Are there any questions? All right. Who's given the right to control airplanes?
Federal.
So, in 1867, England said, when airplanes are invented, they're going to be federal. Is that what happened? When were airplanes invented?
1914.
Close enough. Probably exactly right. That's about where I was thinking it was. But this thing was made in 1867. How did we get airplanes included in this? Do you think that these guys knew that airplanes were going to be invented? And then they said, when we finally get there in 40 years, we're going to make it federal? But it is federal, right? You guys know that. You have to go through an airport, the Federal Aeronautics Act, the whole deal about being searched and what you're allowed to take on planes. Why? It's because England knew the world would change. They've done this before. And they recognize the world will change. It's not going to remain the same. And even though we've categorized all of these things, there's going to be new things. And what they said was, anything new goes to the federal. That's why planes are federal. Because they're new. And this is one of the reasons why people think that somehow the federal government is more powerful. They're not. But they do get new things added. They're not more powerful. They cannot change this. They cannot make laws in any of these areas. They are not a higher power, but they do get new stuff. Go ahead.
The cars were invented later than 1867. Then why MPI is...
Because roads weren't. We still had transportation within the province. We had box carts. Yeah, we had roads.
Okay.
It was called the Trans-Canada Mud Hole, right? Right? Things. But yeah, we had transportation, and transportation was given to the provincial government in 1867. Even though we didn't have cars. Okay? We didn't have cars. But we do have transportation. Hello. Go ahead.
So, in a case where, like in Quebec, the drinking age is 18, but in Ontario it's 19. And Gatineau is like literally like just a few minutes drive from Ottawa. So if an 18-year-old goes to Quebec to get a drink and then goes back to Ontario, to Ottawa, would that be an offense, like a crime?
The drinking wouldn't be. And ask me how I know. I mean, this happens all the time. Do people from Saskatchewan come over to Manitoba when they're 18? Do they drink? What Quebec could do, and I don't think they do, is what Ontario could do is to say it's illegal for a person that is 18 to have alcohol in their system. But they can only do it when they're in Ontario. You can't make laws that go over the border. But they could do that. They could say it's illegal for someone under the age of 19 to have consumed alcohol. So you got to stay in Quebec until it's all gone. And then you're fine. Are you with me so far? Any questions? This will become quite a bit more complicated as we start to add pieces, which is why if you're not clear now, I really need you to ask them. Any questions you have about any of this? Think about it for a second. Anything that doesn't quite make sense. There's the Canada Health Act. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, what did you say about 91, 92?
These are the sections. These are the numbers of the sections in the statute. This statute, by the way, has a name. I'm going to give you the old name first. It's called the British North America Act. That is what it's called. An act and a statute are the same thing. It was passed in England in 1867. It's a document, it's a piece of paper, it's numbered. It goes from 1 to probably 400 or something like that. And when we get to 91, it says the federal government has the right to make laws on these things and list them. When you get to 92, it says the provincial government has the right to make laws on these things and it lists them. And then it goes on and talks about other things in the remainder of the statute. Go ahead.
And then you said that year was when like the first statute came out, the 67.
The proper way to look at this is it's when the statute came out, not the first one. There's amendments to it, but for this course, you don't need to really know about that. The only thing you kind of have to know is that provinces got added, but now it's all done. And this is the important bit, and it was there in 1867. Okay? So this is the part I want you to understand about the British North America Act, is this. These two sections together have a name. They're called the Division of Powers, because they divide up the powers between the province and the federal government. Are you with me on this so far? Okay. Any other questions? This Canada Health Act. And it's a valid piece of legislation. I'm going to explain what valid means in a minute. In other words, it's fine. How can that be? There's only one possible answer. How can we have a valid Canada Health Act.
They agree to it?
No.
How it governs things outside of provincial governance?
I'm going to rephrase what you said a tiny bit, okay? It's not about health. If it was about health, it would be invalid. The wrong government made it. Because the only government that's allowed to make laws about healthcare is? So the federal government can't. So this is a piece of legislation called the Canada Health Act, but it can't be about health. And it's not. It's about money. And what it says is, provinces, if you provide these services, and it lists them, and there's lots, basically everything you'd ever want to go to the doctor about. If you provide them and don't charge, we'll give you money. And if you don't, we won't. And this is because the federal government cannot control health care. And the provinces can't pay for it. Do you know how much health care is of our budget, our Manitoba budget, folks? Anybody? I've looked this up a few times. I'm pretty close. I think I know what it is. What percentage do we put into health care?
33.
It's approximately there. It's somewhere between 30 and 40% of the budget. That is, if we spend $1 trillion, $400 billion of it is for health care. We cannot raise that amount of money with how much you pay for Twinkies at the grocery store and getting their 8%. They just can't. It's not enough. So, healthcare is extremely expensive. It's a major part of our budget. And the federal government says, look, we don't want you to charge for it. So we'll make a deal. And the deal is contained in the statute. And it says, if you follow our rules, because we can't make you make rules. But we can tell you that if you follow the rules, we'll give you money. What is that called, by the way?
Bribe.
It's a bribe. And what's the other one called? And if you don't, we will take away all of that money. Yeah. So the Canada Health Act is basically a bribery blackmail act, depending on which way you look at it. But it has to do with the fact that in 1867, when healthcare was given to the provinces, it didn't look like it did now. We had doctors, they got paid with a chicken, right? Here's a pound of flour for what you do. They never got paid very much. They weren't rich or anything. They never made a lot of money. And if you couldn't afford to pay it, sometimes you didn't get health care, or sometimes the doctor did it for free. But we didn't have universal health care, and it wasn't even thought of in 1867 until Tommy Douglas came along and advocated for it. Started in Saskatchewan, and it expanded throughout the country, and the federal government wants it, so they offer to pay for it. And it's all because England gave health care to the provinces. A lot of people say, we should have just given it to the federal government, right? And it would be a lot simpler and cleaner and better controlled, but that's not what happened, and we can't really change this now.
Why not?
I'm going to explain that in a bit. I'm going to give you the quick answer. Because we can't get along. Right? We can't come up with something that everyone's going to accept. So remember how it has to change, which is you got to go ask England. So England isn't going to go, oh, federal government, you want this area, but the provinces still want it? Well, we'll just give it to the federal government because we like you better. They don't do that. They basically do what we ask them to do. But if we don't get along, they don't get involved in sorting that out. They'll just leave it. All right. We have a lot to cover here tonight. We haven't even started. Okay, let me give you an example of how this worked, okay? this will confuse some of you who have an incorrect understanding of something. And many of you are not going to see this the way it actually is because you think you understand it, but you don't have it right. There's very common misperceptions, okay? So I'm going to explain to you how this works today, and it's going to have you understand a little bit about how this actually matters, okay? So, back in the early 80s, when someone got convicted of an impaired driving offense, the statute said that you can get a fine between $100 and I don't know what the top limit is, probably $1,000, okay? $100 and $1,000, and you had your driver's license suspended for 30 days. That was what the statute said happened when you got convicted of impaired driving. And the normal sentence in the early 80s was a $400 fine and a 30-day license suspension. And they took away your driver's license. You actually had to bring it to court, and they made you hand it in. They took it away, okay? Because you got convicted of it. Do you understand that? So, do you need your driver's license for a tractor? The answer is no. You didn't back then for sure. Quads? No. Snowmobiles? No. Boats? Do you need a driver's license to operate a boat, folks? Not a boat license, a driver's license. Do you need? No, you don't. Am I wrong about that? You need a boating license, right, nowadays, but you don't need a driver's license to operate a boat. Do you? I don't think you do. You need a boater's license. You can get that online, right? You can take my course, $20. I made that up. I don't even know how to operate a boat. But you could operate a boat. You didn't need a driver's license to operate anything other than a car on the highway, basically, right? So when they took away your driver's license, it meant you couldn't drive a car on a road, street, or thoroughfare, right? You couldn't drive it on that. But, so when a farmer got convicted of impaired driving and they lost their driver's license for 30 days, you could always spot them because they're the one who drove their tractor to the bar that night. Because they could. They couldn't drive a car because they needed a driver's license for that, and that got taken away. So, what happened was, somebody got the idea that they didn't want to lose their driver's license for 30 days. So they decided that they were going to challenge the law. Now, this is an important point. I'm going to talk to you about it in the context of this case, but you can't miss this, okay? This is what happens. When someone says, this is not followed properly, they can ask the judge to strike down the law. The judge has a power to say, the wrong government made this law, and because the wrong government made the law, it's invalid. And who has to abide by it if it's invalid? Nobody. So the Constitution can strike down statutes if governments break the rules. And the rules, at this point in time, is you got to pass laws in the areas that were given to you. If you decide you're going to sneak outside of that area and pass a law about something that was given to the other government, the court will look at that law and say, you're not allowed to make that. And because you weren't allowed to make it, it's not valid. And therefore, no one has to abide by it. So, going back to the idea of the impaired driving, somebody made this argument. Federal government, you can't touch my driver's license.
So the judge can touch the driver's license?
No. They asked the judge to say, the law that says the federal government will take away my driver's license is a law about when I can drive. Who has the right to make laws about when you can drive and when you can't drive?
The province.
Can the federal government make a law saying when you can and can't drive? No. And they said, strike down that law. What do you think, folks? Did the court do it? Don't look at what you think happens today. Do you think that they would do that? They did. It's the wrong government. The only government that can make laws about driving and when you have and don't have a driver's license is the provincial government. So the federal government was trying to punish you using something that they did not have the right to use because of the British North America Act of 1867. And a judge said, yeah, you're right. You can't take away the driver's license. Only the provincial government can do that. It's their license. They have the right. You can't stick your nose in there. So, a short time later, in the mid-1980s, the federal government responded to that. They lost the right to take away your driver's license because they didn't have the right to make that law. So they do not. And they still do not. And they do not because they cannot. So when you get convicted of an impaired driving, the federal government, through the court system, does not take away your driver's license anymore. What they do is they prohibit you from operating any motor vehicle anywhere in Canada. In any public place anywhere in Canada. So they say, well, you can keep your license, you can do whatever you want, but you just can't operate a motor vehicle because I can't touch your license. So when you get convicted of an impaired driving now, first offense, they will do this for minimum of a year, right? They will say you cannot operate any motor vehicle anywhere in Canada. Can they do that?
How is that different?
Because you get to keep your license.
But it's still governing drivers, isn't it?
No, it's different enough.
You say so.
I understand what you're thinking. Try to... So, there was a guy recently, about a year ago, maybe two now, because I think in Brandon, that had this happen to him, right? He lost his license. And he was prohibited from operating any motor vehicle anywhere in Canada. He was an old guy. He was like 70, 80 years old. Had I'm making this up, but he was walking with a little oxygen thing and things. And he smoked. And he needed some cigarettes. And he couldn't get to the store because he wasn't allowed to drive. So, you know what he did? He drove his ride-on tractor. You know his little garden tractor, his ride-on mower, folks? He got on his ride-on mower, and he drove down to, I don't know, Hurls or something like that, and the things, bought his cigarettes. The police caught him, and they charged him with operating a motor vehicle against his prohibition. It's called a prohibition now, right? And he went to jail for 9 months for going to the store for smokes because he wasn't allowed to operate a motor vehicle. And the idea behind it is driving licenses and your ability to drive has to be controlled by the provincial government. You with me on this so far? So, people think that the federal government, when you get convicted, takes away your driver's license, because that's what they used to do. They don't do it anymore because they can't. And they can't because of 1867. So they prohibit you from operating any motorized vehicle. Does that mean a boat?
Yes.
Yep. Does that mean a snowmobile? Yep. A quad? Yep. A tractor? Yep. And it's in any public place. So you can operate a tractor in your field without breaking that prohibition, but you cannot take that tractor across a roadway to another one without running the risk of being prosecuted for driving while prohibited, which is also a criminal offense. Carlos?
Oh, what do you say about when our government is kind of doing something that doesn't regard to them? You're not supposed to abide by the law?
That law is invalid. And if a law is invalid, no one has to abide by it. All right. So, let me just take you to this next step, because what will happen at the same time when you get convicted of an impaired driving is the province will suspend your driver's license. Can the province suspend your driver's license?
Yes.
They have the right to make the laws. And they don't suspend it for the same amount of time as the prohibition. The first one will coincide. They're both are a year. But the second one, the courts will normally impose for a second impaired 2-year prohibition. But the province will suspend your driver's license for 5. And if there's a third one, and it's within 2 years, within 5 years for the feds, and within 10 years, 3 within 10, they will suspend your driver's license for 10 years. The province does. And it doesn't just apply to impaireds. It applies to MPI fraud, stealing vehicles or any parts of vehicles, talking to a hooker. If you get caught talking to a hooker, you will get your license suspended first time for a year, second time 5. Did you know this, folks? And what's that got to do with your driving?
Remind me, is it illegal to buy sex?
Yes. Communication for the purpose of prostitution is a criminal offense.
So you're using your vehicle to transport that?
Are you always? No. What if it's in a bar? Right? You still have your driver's license suspended. And if we go back to the impaired, when they take away your license for 5 years for your second one, there's a very interesting question, which is this. Where does the provincial government get the right to punish you for a crime?
It's a government thing. It's a federal thing.
Crimes are federal. Can the province punish you for committing a crime? What's the answer, folks? No. But they do. They do. They will take away your license.
And no one strike down law?
Not yet. I don't think they can. I don't think that they can do it. I don't think that they have the right to punish people for crimes, especially crimes that were already punished by the federal system. The federal system has already given you your fine or your jail sentence and your prohibition. And the province says, we want ours too. And we want to make sure that we look like we're bigger and badder and worser, so we're going to make it more than they do. And where does the provincial government get the right to punish people for criminal acts? And the answer is, they can't. So unless they can make some argument that says somehow this is within their area to control because it's your license, which is a pretty hard thing to say when some of the things that you lose your license for have nothing to do with driving. So they have these things called Schedule A offenses, and they involve things like communication for purpose of prosecution, theft of motor vehicles or their parts, driving while disqualified or suspended, impaired driving, dangerous driving, There's all these offenses. Many of them are federal offenses. Not all of them. But some of the ones that are provincial have nothing to do with driving. And if you're convicted of one of those, it's 1 year. Any 2 of them within a 10-year period, it's 5 years. Any 3 of them, it used to be life. You get 3 of these you lose your license forever. I don't know where they get the right to do that.
Because the federal government they only have so many courts and they don't want to deal with it?
No. They have to convict you. The court convicts you, they give you a sentence right there. And then behind the scenes, there's an administrative thing that gets done where the MPI will look at your conviction that got sent to them and they'll say, oh, you got a conviction for this. We're taking away your license. You just get a letter in the mail. There's not even a hearing.
I've had subordinates that we've had to drive into court to pay their fines, and they pay it at the provincial court or the court downtown. So If it's provincial, if it's a federal fine, why is it being paid through those means then?
That has to do with how the court system is set up. There's provincial and federal courts, and provincial courts deal with criminal offenses even though it's a provincial court. Don't get into that. Okay? It does happen though. Go ahead.
So the federal government can't touch your license because it's under Section 92 of the provincial law. But then the provincial law can't touch your license because...
they can touch your license, but they can't punish you for a crime. So if, for example, you ran into a pole because you weren't paying attention, and they bring you in for a hearing, and they say, look, you're just a shitty driver, right? We're going to take away your license for 4 months. Can they do that? Absolutely, right? What they can't do is say, hey, you committed a crime. We're going to punish you, even though the federal government already did, for a crime. Because the provincial government cannot deal with crimes. They can't deal with the punishment of crimes. They can't deal with what the sentence is for crimes. They're not allowed to touch crimes. It was given to England in 1867. All right. Are there any questions about any of that? Go ahead.
Is there a different enough way for the province to say, in response to the federal action against your crime, we also do this?
There might be. It's a bad argument, though. There's a lot of things wrong with it. It gets worse as we progress in tonight's course, okay? There's a very good argument, and it's not... None of this is airtight. There's not yes and no. There's not right and wrong. There's not this is what will happen. There's arguments, right? So there's a very good argument that is you cannot punish people for crimes. Do you get that argument? The question is, if they can show we're not punishing them for crimes, we're controlling driving licenses, right? We have the right to do that. The problem is they're clearly punishing people for crimes, right? Like it's not, there isn't even a hearing. Like, you lose it, and that you just get a notice. You got convicted of this, there's no hearing, there's no things, and it's an automatic process without anything. Just automatic. And it's gone. So, if they can figure out something, I can't. I've thought about this quite a bit, but it's going to get worse. Go ahead.
I'm just thinking, like, if you're able to tell this to us at university class, like, how come this argument isn't taking place in a larger arena?
Because I haven't taken it there yet.
All right.
I'm very seriously thinking of trying to get this figured out. There's a way I can do it. There's a way that people can ask to have laws sorted out. And this one boggles my mind. And I've seen a lot, especially young people, that really get hurt by this. And it bugs me. Right? It bugs me. It bugs me that they're doing this. It's like perimeteritis, too. Taking away your license, they go, oh, you can just take a taxi. Or you can just, do something else, right? You can just take the bus. Well, not if you got to haul water, if your house that's 15 miles or 20 miles out of town. How do you do that? On a bus, right? Well, what if you got to go for chemotherapy, right? And these laws are developed by people that do not realize how other people live, right? And there's going to be issues with respect to that. They're going to come up later on today. Okay, I'm going to just introduce you to where we're going to go next. And then we're going to take a break for this to sort of settle in, and then we're going to complicate things quite a bit more. So, this stayed in place for over 100 years, 125 years. This was the rules. The rules for making the rules were found in this document that was created in 1867. And it was our Constitution. And it divided up the powers between the two. Got that? So, in the 1980s, we had Pierre Trudeau was our Prime Minister, and he basically said, you know what, we're all grown up. I don't want to be going back to England every time we need a constitutional change made and saying, please change our Constitution. Like, how many of you phone up your parents and ask if you can go out tonight? How many of you do that still? Put up your hands if you ask for permission, right? You want to go, can I, hey, I'm thinking of going out with Bobby, can I? How many of you don't do that anymore? How many of you don't do that anymore? You don't call up your parents and ask for permission. Why? You're all grown up. Well, we had the situation where wherever, if we wanted anything changed here, we had to go and ask England, could you please do it for us? Right? And after over 100 years, Trudeau said, let's bring it home. Let's make this an internal document rather than an English statute. Let's make it Canadian. And let's kick England out. And England, they were in this time, they were basically decolonizing lots of places. They gave up control of Hong Kong. They gave up control of India quite a long time before that, right? They weren't things, but we had a big problem. And it has to do with something I said. What happens if this becomes under the control of Canada? I made a little mention of it. It's going to be a problem that we got to sort out. Can anybody guess or think about what that problem is going to be?
Power to, or the right to distribute the power again?
It's close enough for just before the break. How do we change it?
Ratify it, you have to vote on it.
Who? How? When? What are the rules, right? When we had to send it back to England, changing it was easy. We knew how it got changed. We asked England, England changed it. It's their statute, they can change it. But if we remove England, we've lost the how it gets changed. And this was a major deal that had to get sorted out. It did get sorted out. I'll tell you more about this when you come back. Please be back here at exactly 23 minutes to. Course outlines up here. They're free stuff right at the front. Yes, absolutely. You can.
I know, I can.
Okay. You can. Okay. The only thing that you can do, it's a very tiny, tiny rule. So you go and sit and see who supports you, your view, and vote for them. And if lots of people feel the same that person would get voted in. You can also ask the government, but yeah, those are the things you can do to try to encourage legal change, but it's got to be the right government. In other words, if you petition the provincial government to make a law that gets changed that they don't have the power to do, that's not going to work, right? It's got to be the right government. But the quick answer is that you can try to influence, but you cannot control. So the best you can do is talk about issues that concern you and ask, and try to vote for people that think like you do. But there's still limits. No. They may have control. They may. I mean, they have a stronger influence in common law, for sure, because they can say that this is the rules and ask a judge to agree with them. And then it's you talking to a judge, and the judge may agree with you. It's a lot more powerful. But common law has its own limits, right? In other words, you can't judges can only deal with the situations that are right in front of them, and if you want something changed and there's no case on that, there's no way to get there. But the other thing you could do is, like if you go back to your example, maybe you don't want the law changed, maybe you want it used in a different way. So you might, for example, go and, take a petition to the Crown Attorney who's responsible for asking for the sentences and say, we want harsher sentences. Right? So there's political ways to try to get a result, but the right to control laws is provided by the government. And governments are a little hard for individuals to actually influence. Not impossible, but pretty much. They make laws in the areas that were given to them, and they can only make laws in those areas. Criminal law is federal. Thank goodness.
脑袋没听明白呀。你老说我回家有点尴尬呀。啥的呀
？Areas.
我家长会为啥？我没过路卡呀。我开不了车，我没有驾照。
然后你父母看能不能在国内给你过继一个，没错吧
？They are, but they can't use their license to punish you.
我今天也走走吧。今天轮到了。
Because a crime is supposed to be punished by the federal government. So the fact that they have the right to control licenses doesn't mean they can also use them to punish you. Try and deal with that question. Explain that.
他就要分清那个
I think I explained that.
但是他反而就是你不是说你没有这个权利去那个 punish the criminal， 但是你 did what you did was specific about the government.
他就是我不可以认定他是犯罪的这方面，但是我可以在觉得你好像不符合我的规定。
不是，但是他就说我惩罚你这方面的事情，就是因为你在那个驾驶上面违反了这个条例，所以这是一个 criminal， 对吧？他已经是一个犯罪了，已经构成犯罪了。然后呢，是联邦已经punish他了，对吧？然后在此基础之上呢，然后这个省联邦就说我会给你来个阿尔法，然后呢会扣掉你的license，或者是延期他的这个就还有时间，然后他就我权利是从哪来的？省是从哪里来的权利来punish你的 criminal？ 从什么举这个例子？
我没听到关于像你这种阐述的方法呀。
我一直在说着。
他说的就是，
不是吗？
他说的就是两个不同的东西，然后一个是省的， 去判断的，一个是联邦的要去判断的。
他前面说就是说那个你不可以去那个联邦没有权利去扣你的license。
对，联邦
对吧？然后但是后面就说省却有权利来对你进行处罚，因为你的那个在驾驶方面的犯罪，省却有权利来处罚你，对吧？
对，省它是有权利扣掉你的驾照，
对吧？因为什么呢？因为你犯罪这块是归于联邦的，对吧？
对，你扣掉你的驾照，但不一定就说你是犯罪呀。
如果你没有这个犯罪方面的事情，为什么你要扣驾照呢？
可能就是，
他不还是因为你去 commit criminal？
你觉得他可能在可能什么事情违法，就是违章了，这属于犯罪吗？
属于。
按我的理解，好像违章了不属于。
就比方说，像是你那个汽车那个违人停罚单啊，什么fine这些属于谁？
但是我觉得，如果把它定义为 criminal， 这个
就说明说，比方说你有什么酒驾或者这驾那驾，你有那个一个，然后这个 flag 那个联邦会罚你，然后如果你有2个、3个，你有可能会时间更长，因为联邦对你是2年，省是5年，然后有可能会吊销你的驾照。
对，
吊销驾照并不是联邦来进行的，是省来进行，还是因为你之前有你这个罪行，其中2项、3项像醉驾或者什么各种乱七八糟的驾，然后是除了省的惩罚以外，还有联邦，除了联邦惩罚以外还有省的。你不明白他们说举这个例子，就最后我知道他说的这个是事实，他在阐述这么一个事实，而且他在阐述一个他不具备省是从哪里来的权利。但是我不明白他为什么举这个例子。
你看他刚才最后一个他讲的这个，假如你开车掉到一个水塘里头了，他刚才讲的，你听到最后咱们临结束了，他说假如你开车开到一个湖里面，就是你就理解为一个水池子里或者怎么样，他说联邦就是那个省里就可以说啊，你这个不会开车或怎么样，把你的驾照吊销了3个月，然后但是联邦，哎呀，当时那话是怎么说？但是联邦，哎呀，我怎么听当时逻辑是对的，现在又忘记了。你听没听到那个例子？
我听到，但是我并没有完全明白。就是他说的内容我明白了，但是我不明白他为什么要说这些。还是因为为了要引出那个要修改的话怎么修改？
也许，回去好好再听一下录。
You gotta hurry, Carlos. I'm gonna answer your question. Go first. Hurry. Come back. How many of you have taken management with me? Put up your hands. You've done it? Quite a few. Okay. You might recall the last lecture we had in that where I talked about people who know what they're doing. Remember that? What did I say about people that know what they're doing? Experts. They're shitty instructors. Remember that? Because things are very clear to them. And it's very hard for someone who knows how all of this works to see how you wouldn't be clear. And I was asked a question during the break, and it relates to something that the gentleman at the back asked me too, and I've kind of realized that I think I've cut a corner in a way that is doing you a disservice. And in this class, I always try to teach it in a fairly black and white way, because if I don't, it's really hard for people to deal with vague, right? It's really hard to deal with vague. So I realized as a result of the question that I was asked, that there's a source of confusion because of something that I was reluctant to deal with because it is a little bit of a vague concept. But I don't think that I can